20 Unbelievable Facts, Old West Secrets. They called it the Wild West, a land carved by dust, dead, and stubborn dreams. But beneath the gun smoke and legend was something stranger, something truer. Tonight, by this fire, we'll open a few of the West's quiet secrets, the kind that historians whisper about when the lamps burn low. 20 facts, all real, all unbelievable. Fact 1. The Wild West wasn't as wild as we think out here. Lawlessness gets all the glory. Shootouts on Main Street, blood on the boardwalk. But the truth? For every famous gunfight, there were 100 calm, uneventful days. In Dodge City, between 1876 and 1885, fewer than 10 murders a year were recorded, and half of those involved the same drunks fighting over cards. The average cowboy was more worried about sunstroke than shootouts. The Wild West, it turns out, was built mostly on hard work and harder storytelling. Fact 2. Cowboys were often teens, and many were black or Mexican. When we picture a cowboy, we imagine a white man under a wide hat. Truth says otherwise. Historians estimate that nearly 1 in 4 cowboys were black freedmen, and another quarter were Mexican vaqueros, whose techniques shaped everything from the lasso to the saddle horn. Most were barely out of boyhood, 15, 16 years old, riding for $1 a day in a spot by the fire. They spoke little, sang often, and kept the herds moving through storms that would scare a preacher into silence. Fact 3. The first female stagecoach driver outran bandits in a snowstorm. In 1868, Mary Fields, known as Stagecoach Mary, took the reins after her driver was shot on a Montana route. She was 6 feet tall, smoked cigars, carried 2 guns, and could fix a broken axle faster than most men could curse one. When bandits tried her coach in a blizzard, she whipped the team through the drift, firing from the box seat until the trail turned red with warning. She delivered every sack of mail, then patched her bullet holes before sunrise. The U.S. Postal Service later made her the first black woman to hold a star route contract in America. Sometimes I think folks like Mary never left this land. Maybe that's why the West still feels watched by courage that refuses to fade. If you're still here by the fire, don't wander off yet. There are more truths waiting in the dark. And if you love hearing the West as it really was, not the way dime novels sold it, stay close. Subscribe before the fire burns low. Fact 4. The most deadly job wasn't gunfighting, it was logging and rail work. When the rails pushed westward, it wasn't bullets that killed most men, it was physics. Falling timber, boiler explosions, collapsing tunnels. Between 1865 and 1890, rail accidents claimed more lives than all the frontier shootouts combined. The men who built the tracks were Irish, Chinese, freed slaves, and wanderers, earning $1 a day and losing fingers to the iron beast. They called themselves the ground beneath progress, and progress didn't often look down to thank them. Fact 5. Tombstone was a boomtown built on guano and silver. Everyone remembers the gunfight at the OK Corral, but few recall what brought people there in the first place: bat droppings. Prospectors discovered silver veins in caves thick with guano, and for a while, bat fertilizer was as valuable as ore. Tombstone's first millionaires made their start mining manure. Maybe that's the West in a nutshell, finding treasure in what everyone else turns their nose at. Fact 6. Buffalo Bill's show invented the myth of the West while it still existed. In 1883, William Buffalo Bill Cody turned real frontier events into spectacle. His traveling Wild West show featured Annie Oakley, Lakota warriors, and mock battles with the U.S. cavalry, selling romance while the actual frontier was still alive. He performed for queens in Europe and miners in Nevada, teaching both to believe the same myth, that the West was a place of honor and destiny, rather than exhaustion and dust. When the frontier officially closed in 1890, his show was already touring back east, proof that sometimes the legend survives its own truth. Fact 7. The most feared gunslinger was a 15-year-old boy. They called him Billy the Kid, but history forgot the rest, that he read books, played guitar, and once worked as a ranch cook. Born Henry McCarty, orphaned young, he turned to theft, not for greed but survival. His legend of killing 21 men is mostly a lie. Records confirm maybe 4. Yet his face, boyish and smiling, haunted every sheriff in the territory. He died at 21, shot by a friend turned lawman Pat Garrett. The real tragedy? The kid might have lived to grow wise, but the West liked its heroes dead. Fact 8. One town elected its saloon owner as mayor, and she cleaned it up. In 1887, in Argonia, Kansas, the men laughed when they wrote Susanna Salter's name on the ballot, a prank meant to humiliate her. By sundown, she'd won. The first female mayor in American history, she ran the town like she ran her saloon, firm, fair, and with no tabs. Within a year, crime dropped by half, and respect for her doubled. Sometimes the West's biggest revolutions didn't carry guns, just a vote and a steady voice. Fact 9. Outlaws often had better publicists than heroes. Newspapers in the 1880s discovered that nothing sold faster than fear, so they paid for it, sending reporters to interview Jesse James, Butch Cassidy, and Belle Starr, romanticizing robbery like it was rebellion. Even Pinkerton detectives leaked false stories to inflate their own heroism. So much of the Wild West, was marketing, the first frontier brand campaign. If truth had an agent, maybe the West would have ended with fewer ghosts. Fact 10. There were fewer gunfights than barbershops. By 1880, Dodge City had 12 licensed barbers and only 1 official gunfight that year. Tombstone had more dentists than duels. Barbers were essential. They cut hair, stitched wounds, and extracted teeth before whiskey could numb the pain. Some say the cleanest men in the West weren't the sheriffs, but the barbers. Fact 11. The native code talkers of the 1800s were never recognized. Before the famous Navajo code talkers of World War II, there were scouts, Apache, Comanche, Pawnee, hired by the U.S. Army in the 1870s. They used tribal dialects to send messages across enemy lines that white officers couldn't decipher. Their brilliance shortened battles and saved countless lives, yet history barely wrote their names. The land remembers even when the ledgers don't. Fact 12. The frontier had its own internet, the telegraph, Cowboy. Before phones, one man rode from ranch to ranch with telegraph updates, handwritten notes strung together from distant wires. They called him the Telegraph Cowboy. He delivered births, deaths, news of markets and marriages. And sometimes he chose what to leave out, making him the first Western editor of fate. When the railroads came, his role vanished overnight, but for a brief time he was the internet of the plains. Fact 13. The town of Deadwood had more millionaires per capita than New York City. Gold dust made Deadwood a shining wound in the wilderness. By 1876, it had 5,000 residents, and nearly 50 were millionaires. But the wealth was fleeting. By the 1890s, floods, fires, and moral rot took it all. Even Calamity Jane ended her days in a boarding house, surrounded not by riches, but stories. In the West, fortunes came fast and left faster, like summer rain over sand. Fact 14. Cowboys rarely owned their horses. They might ride them for months, sleep beside them, and die trying to save them. But the horses belonged to the ranch. A good mount cost 3 years' pay, and cowboys were too broke to buy one. Instead, they named them, prayed over them, and moved on when the job ended. Love, in the West, often meant caring for what you could never keep. Fact 15. The real cowboys versus Indians were often allies. Despite dime novel drama, history tells another truth. Many tribes traded and worked with cowhands, guiding herds through territories for fair wages and food. Conflict existed, yes, but cooperation was just as common. In some areas, ranchers learned the land's rhythm from the very people Washington tried to erase from it. The frontier wasn't just a war, it was a negotiation with nature and with each other. Fact 16. The most dangerous animal in the West wasn't a rattlesnake. It was the humble horse. More men were killed or crippled by horse accidents than by bullets, thrown saddles, midnight stampedes, broken necks, and dry riverbeds. Every cowboy feared the day his mount spooked. When the papers printed death notices, they rarely blamed the animal. They called it a sudden misstep of Providence out here. Even friendship could break your bones. Fact 17. Chinese workers built half the West and were written out of it. Tens of thousands of Chinese immigrants laid the Central Pacific Railroad, blasting through granite with hand drills and black powder. They hung from cliffs in wicker baskets to plant dynamite charges, earning less pay and no credit. When the Golden Spike was driven at Promontory Summit in 1869, not one Chinese worker was invited to the ceremony. The iron road that tied America together was built by hands history tried to forget. Fact 18. There were more patents filed per person in the frontier states than anywhere else. Necessity is a cruel teacher, but a good one. Settlers invented windmills that pumped water, collapsible stoves, adjustable saddles, even early refrigeration using evaporation. Most of their names vanished with the dust storms, but their inventions kept families alive. The West was never only wild, it was ingenious. Fact 19. The deadliest epidemic wasn't cholera or smallpox. It was loneliness. Men died of it in bunkhouses, women in sod homes with miles between neighbors. Letters took months, visitors longer. One Texas preacher wrote that souls rot quicker than bodies when left alone too long. So people sang to themselves, carved chess pieces from bone, or talked to ghosts that never argued back. In every forgotten town, loneliness was the quiet killer that filled more graves than gunmen. Fact 20. The West didn't end, it just changed clothes. When the frontier closed in 1890, reporters said the West was over. But it only shifted into oil fields, rail hubs, and silent film studios that kept replaying its myths. The same hunger to conquer open space became the urge to conquer sky and screen. And if you listen closely, you can still hear it. The rhythm of spurs in a boardroom, the dry laugh of a drifter in a downtown bar. The West never died. It learned to wear a suit. Maybe that's the truest secret of all. The Old West wasn't about heroes or villains. It was about endurance. It was farmers watching the horizon for rain that didn't come, mothers burying children beside rail lines, poets writing on flour sacks because paper cost too much. It was people who kept going when every good reason said stop. So if you're still here by the fire, maybe you understand why we keep telling these stories, because somewhere inside every one of us, there's still a rider staring into the dusk, wondering if the next trail will finally lead home. And if you ever want to sit by this fire again to hear what history hid beneath the dust, stay a while. There are more secrets where these came from.